Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah, a queer therapist, writer, parent, and journalist.
And I'm Sarah's partner, Alex. I work in communications, and we've been married for 15 years and had an open relationship for about 3.
And I'm also very excited to introduce our guest, Eli, who I'm going to do an introduction and then you jump in and tell me what I missed.
Okay, sounds good.
Progressive policy wonk, barbecue lovin', blazing hot transmasc drag performer. Eli, what else?
Wow, I don't know. I think you nailed all of it. Also, and big hugger.
Big hugger.
Good hug. Yeah, there we go.
Lover of bubbly grapefruit soda water.
Yes, grapefruit, bubbly water all the time.
Are you willing to go on record that it's the best flavor?
It is. LaCroix can suck it.
Yeah.
We need
That's our
some
sponsor,
sort of
Eli.
Oh, seriously? No. Okay.
Do you know how far I would be if that was our sponsor?
Yeah.
I finally feel like I'd arrived.
Right. I just want one flavor to sponsor us. Like, brought to you by LaCroix Apricot. Way better than peach pear. Okay. So anyway, yes, no, they're not. We have no sponsors. We are beholden to no one. So Eli, will you start by telling us a little bit about your journey to non-monogamy and what it looks like in your life right now? You were one of those weird people who started being non-monogamous during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I would say like so many people, I actually started non-monogamy in a long-term relationship, and then it crashed and burned. And then the pandemic happened, and then I was like, okay, actually, I do want to try this again, but I want to try it more on my terms. I want to try it in a sense of where I'm not trying to like save a relationship, right? Where it's actually like, what's actually the grounding aspect of this for me? Like why, like, because I think I had started it with my partner at the time because, you know, I thought there was something to save, or if they had more access to other people, that then maybe they would like me more. Like it was very much out of like desperation, you know, feelings of smallness and shame, you know, the fun things.
Yeah.
That whole not enough, too much paradigm that we all love living in.
Yeah, definitely. So after that relationship crashed and burned, that was the week of the pandemic. So we broke up on a Saturday. Inslee shut the state down on Monday. And I moved out the following Friday, and I moved into an apartment by myself for the first time ever. I had never lived alone before. And then the West Seattle Bridge shut 3 days later. So
Eli.
Oh my God.
You just made the hair. I like I'm so scared right now.
Yeah.
Wow. So how does it feel to be talking to people again?
Oh, so good. It's so good. Especially, again, the whole hug thing. Like, touch is like a big deal to me. So, you know, to like lose a partnership, lose your house, lose like community, lose your sense of the world. I mean, the whole world. I think we were all kind of crashing and burning at that time. And I just remember like sitting in my apartment alone and like, you know, the one piece of furniture I had, watching, you know, like SPD like turn cars around, you know, on the bridge. And I was just like, oh, I'm alone.
So alone.
Yeah. So, but at the, you know, like so many stories, silver lining of that is by actually being so alone for kind of the first time in my life and having a lot of time to myself, to think, to be in my body. That was also right around the time that was like midway of like being more comfortable being trans and non-binary, being on testosterone. I like started testosterone at the beginning of the pandemic too. So like non-monogamy actually just was like it was something I'd always wanted to touch back into, because the idea of starting another relationship and I think like putting all your eggs in one basket with one person, I think just felt completely overwhelming. I was like, I can't imagine starting to date someone right now and be on that similar path and then have that exact same thing happen. And I think, of course, you know, you don't want to just do non-monogamy because you don't want to commit. That's also not the goal. But I think it was a helpful way to like re-enter dating in a way with some more integrity. Yeah. You know, of like, versus just telling everyone like, I want to be casual. Right. You know, I think there's a big difference between dating casually and being non-monogamous, right? Yeah. And so I'm very clearly like, I really want to be non-monogamous. It wasn't just like, oh, I want to do casual dating, but do it ethically. Like it's a different, we're talking about different conversations with people. But I also messed up. Like the first person.
What?
Oh, yeah. No, are you kidding? I made a mistake, y'all. Yeah, like I totally made a mistake. Yeah, the first person I started going on dates with in the pandemic, and of course this is like, you know, if we can all like roll back 3 years, it was like, you know, how much have you isolated? And, you know, it was like pre-vaccine, all the dates were outside, and it like took so much negotiation.
How much are we going to breathe on each other?
Yeah, with every date.
Yeah. You're like, is this the date we negotiate a kiss for next date?
Yeah. I am risking my life to go on this date with you.
Literally.
Because we started dating in that environment for the first time, like in decades, I like kind of, in retrospect, appreciated that there was so much like structure and expectation setting and communication that was required that like I didn't even realize since it's kind of been more not a thing, the way that people are just like, just sort of fall into things or don't talk before about. I just kind of started thinking like, oh, you always like talk before a date, like about how physical it might get. Yeah. And that's like a really actually useful.
It's super useful.
Anytime.
It is.
Yeah. It was a big collective lesson in consent in a way.
Yeah.
I think about that. Actually, I'm just thinking about this last night on a date. How I have never, since we opened up, and I think in large part because of the pandemic, gone in for a kiss without asking first.
Yeah.
And prior to that, my experience with dating, I was a lot younger and it was a really different time. But the idea that you would ask someone to kiss them was kind of anathema, and it certainly wasn't culturally reflected very often.
Right.
And I'm like, I just would never do that now.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, exactly. I feel like too, just like as a queer person, like COVID and negotiation around like boundaries and touch and space, like actually like fits really well just in queer community as well, because like I think as queers, like we've had to do that so often for so long. I mean, even go back in like the AIDS crisis and like how do you negotiate touch in community space, right? What is safety? What is like, how do we define safety, especially when we often feel like the government is failing us around safety? And I think that was kind of a collective experience for a lot of people of like not, can we trust the CDC? Right? Like, can we trust like what they say, or is this actually just about trying to get business open again? And I think for the queer community, we're like, oh, we've been there. I wasn't personally like there as part of the AIDS crisis. I wasn't alive then, but like those were a lot of stories that were getting talked about, I think, with a lot of like queer elders at the beginning of the pandemic, because they were like, we've been here, done this, we know what to do. So it felt actually very normal to negotiate all of that. And then it just made an even more natural fit, at least for me, with non-monogamy, because I was like, we need to talk about our feelings and like make sure we're aligned. And like, he was like, great, this just sounds gay. Cool.
That's amazing.
COVID plus non-monogamy equals gay.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Pretty much.
I think that like gets to a question about like, is there something inherently queer about non-monogamy, even if it's being like practiced by straight people?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And there are people in the queer community who I think would disagree with me, but that's fine. Like tension's fine. But like, I really believe like so much of also even why I prefer the word queer over like gay or like LGBTQ or like other things, like is because queer to me is just about like bending and like not being a part of the normal. Like I wouldn't say like non-monogamy is like inherently queer, but I would say like it's like queer adjacent, or it's like it's the same like I just really feel that like we're all better off when we can all be a lot more flexible and adaptable and fluid. And I think that's so much of what queerness is about, right? It's not about like, oh, I'm from, one of my really good friends, Jolly, always said like, isn't it sad that like as queer people sometimes like we grow up in a box and then we have a crisis of identity and we're just trying to find our next box. Am I bi? Am I a lesbian? Am I this? And it's like, that's why I think like queerness opens up so much, and non-monogamy too. It's not like, oh, I need this particular relationship style. And some people do, and that's fine. But like, it's if we take the pressure off, oh, I only have self-worth and value and I'll only be seen if people see me through this label. Right? So I feel like queerness is really about like fluidity and I think so is like non-monogamy, as far as like different people, like you could want a particular relationship structure, but different people are going to bring out different desires, or you're going to have different shape with different people, and like that's okay.
And that creates, it makes space for creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
And to your point, you can be non-monogamous and not necessarily embrace that concept of creating space for creativity, and you can repeat really uncreative, uncreative relationships over and over again.
Totally.
But the space is there.
The space is there, and I think the challenge is there. Right. And just like the challenge of like, how do you create a secure dynamic with someone? And for some people, that's like focusing just on one person, and for others, it's having space for many people in different ways, and we all find security in different ways.
So how did you possibly mess this up? This all sounds like so well thought out.
Yeah, right? You sound like a relationship coach or something.
Yeah, how did you possibly make a mistake, Eli? That is where this began.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first mistake was, she and I were going on some dates, and it was the summer of the pandemic, right? So like,
this is the first person that you dated. Yeah, okay.
like as kind of a single person out of this, so and all that. So it was like summer of 2020. Also, everything that was happening, and it was just heightened times. And we went on some dates, and I was starting to realize like, oh, I don't think I want this to escalate to be exclusive and be each other's person. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what I want. I'm still trying to like figure out how do I know when a relationship's healthy? Because like that was a big part of my ex. Like I did not realize it had been getting so unhealthy. So like there was a lot of like self-preservation happening. There was a lot of like also just, I'd been in that relationship for so long. So I was like, I just want to I want to like meet a bunch of people. Right. And like, and I also like, I think being more comfortable in my transness was also a big thing. I didn't feel as comfortable in my last relationship, feeling really seen as a trans person. So I also like, this person was really great, like, but I just knew I didn't want to I wasn't ready to be exclusive and be on that relationship escalator that I had done my whole life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think how I messed up was just I didn't communicate that. And I think, again, like heightened things with COVID, touch, all this. So like we finally had gotten to the point where like we could kiss, and I just like didn't pick the right time, like, and like she like went in for a kiss, and like we kissed, and then like the first thing out of my mouth was like, so I also think I want to see other people. So timing might not be
like wait, immediately after.
Yeah. Because I had been holding it in, and I didn't know when to bring it up, and I was so nervous to bring it up because I'd never had that conversation before, and you're
like, I'm excited about kissing, but I'm really excited about talking about the structures of our
right. Like it was just such like it was like a little volcano in my head just went off, and like I have like ADHD, so it was also just like
that's amazing.
Like,
that's amazing.
So she felt rejected, and she felt like not desired, and the thing kind of fizzled out from there, and I apologized, and I like followed up and all that, and but I just think I learned a pretty valuable lesson around like one, like know what you want, and then B, like communicate that, and communicate it early and communicate it often, and there's been a lot of journeys with that with different people over the last few years, learning when to do it, how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you kind of said a really elemental thing there around knowing. Like the challenge of knowing what you want is already one huge challenge, and then
so hard.
Yeah, right. And then knowing
that, what do I want?
And like knowing that independently of the affirmation of somebody else being like, yes, that's okay, and like then being able to communicate what you want, and not feeling like that's probably like where a bunch of like shame and stuff like that comes up. And am I going to be like validated by this person when I tell them what I want? Is what I want valid if it's not what they want? Like that's just like the whole thing, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It totally is.
And now we're getting into therapy zone real fast, but
yay.
We've lived in cultures and often in families where the lesson we were absorbing from the very beginning was you have to hide parts of who you are or not access parts of who you are to be accepted, to be loved, to be cared for. That is the cost of a relationship.
Oof.
I know. Sorry. Happy Sunday, everybody.
Yeah. You're saying that's not true.
So I'm saying that this is like, these are muscles that are hard to develop, and that knowing what you want and believing that you can be cared for and accepted in that is not easy.
Yeah.
And we don't see that modeled.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I feel like that was one of my biggest lessons in the pandemic was like, it's going to sound so corny, but it's so true. It's like actually learning what it feels like to be loved and cared for. You would assume that being totally isolated and alone and unable to touch people when your like love language is touch would be like the ultimate destruction. And there was some rough mental health parts, I'm not gonna lie, like for sure. But also I would say like by moving through that and having to like not rely on myself in the terms of like, I'm an island, I rely on myself, but more of like, I had to learn to rely on friends. I had to like deeply grow and rely on chosen family. And like, my friendships are like stronger than they ever been.
Right.
You know, my best friends like are my everything. And I think also having a deeper chosen family helped me hold more curiosity and flexibility in dating. Because I'm not relying on like the possibility with a romantic partner as being safe and secure in the world.
Right.
Like, I want to experience safety and security with romantic partners, and like, I'm dating someone right now that is like, you know, amazing, and like, I'm actually getting to experience like that like sense of security and building trust and like moving through of like, hey, here's all my things, what are your things? Ooh, I like your things, like, you know, like, this is great, you know. But I think too, like, I wouldn't even have been able to be in this space with the girl I'm seeing now if it hadn't been for developing really deep friendships with people, because I'm able to actually show up in a way that feels grounded. I feel rooted. I feel like cared and held for, and it feels less like, just feels less risky. I mean, there'll always be a level of risk with your heart, right? But like, I just feel like less scared than I've ever been before.
And to your earlier point about eggs all in a basket, if there's only one type of relationship and one person where you could expect to have that kind of intimate care, reciprocity, and feel seen, that stress is going to cause you to start hiding parts of yourself. I think it's really, really hard not to.
Yes.
Because there's so much pressure then.
Totally.
Relationship.
Totally. Well, and that brings up a good point too about like, I think friendships, I think part of the importance of having really strong friendships and being non-monogamous is like, then you also, friends are holding different parts of yourself, right? Like, we all have like, you know, we do different things with different people, or there's certain conversations you have with certain friends, and, you know, there's certain parts of yourself that are like, oh, I can tell this person this, and like, maybe this other person, you know, we talk more about this other thing. And I think with non-monogamy, it's like also given me the ability to like feel like, oh, I can show like different dimensions of myself, you know, with different people. And also like, I know that there are people in my life that see me, you know?
Yeah.
I also think you can appreciate other people more when you're not looking at them like, so how are you going to become my everything?
Yeah.
Right. And not evaluating them based on like, you know, well, I don't like the way they, you know, this is the stupidest example ever, but like, they like tacos and I don't like tacos. So I can't, this is not my forever person, because what are we going to do about the taco situation? Right.
I mean, that is a situation, I would say.
I mean, fortunately, everybody likes tacos, so whatever. That was a terrible, but like, you know, they don't like grapefruit bubbly and only like apricot LaCroix, so we're totally screwed, or whatever. Yeah. Whereas, like, I feel like in non-monogamy, you can be like, oh, that's fine, that's an interesting, incorrect thing about you, but.
Just want to affirm what you're sharing right now. I'm here.
What did you say earlier? It's okay to have tension.
Yeah, it is. Oh my God. Well, I mean, and that's also been a big learning curve, right? Because we also grew up in a culture where it's like, if there's tension, then something's wrong.
Especially in Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this is the segue to talking about the differences. You grew up in Texas, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you lived in Seattle?
Well, I've lived in Seattle probably like 7 or 8 years. So I've lived in Washington for 13.
Okay.
So this is home.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting being a Southerner, right? Because the Southern way is like, you just like are fake nice to everyone, and you're warm, like people feel warm, but like you don't actually really address anything. And then I moved here, which is all passive aggression. You just like don't bring things up, but then it's also not always even a fake nice.
Yeah, people aren't nice.
Yeah. Oh man, there's also that. Yeah. So it's been interesting also then with dating and non-monogamy, because like you have to just like, honestly, like for me it's so somatic too. Like I can feel it in my body when I don't feel as connected or like aligned and everything, and so then I just like, the only way to feel more present is to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's hard. That's a hard thing for me. Like, I would say that's still a skill. Like, you know, in therapy, I'm like working through it, you know, and like realizing that having tension, having differences, figuring out whether those differences are workable, or are they like, okay, like it was great dating you and now like we're just like not a good match. Like that is so hard for me because like there's also so much around like abandonment there, right? Like, you know, growing up in Texas and growing up queer and like just experienced a lot of abandonment just in a lot of ways, right? Like in my own personal life, in my early love life as a young queer person in Texas, just like socially and politically. And so I think like that's always probably like my hardest part in dating is like, is it okay? Like, when is it okay to leave? When is it okay to know that this tension's too much versus like this is a normal tension? And that's what I didn't know with the person I was dating right before the pandemic, is I had no idea, and then all of a sudden it just like crashed and burned. So like that's another part of my journey with non-monogamy is like learning to assess what is the healthy tension, you know, and like being okay with it. Like not everything has to be perfect all the time and like totally like flowers and sunshine, but like, you know, I want to be able to trust my body, but like it's hard to trust your body sometimes.
Have you had the experience of de-escalating a relationship? Like we talk about in non-monogamy, that you don't have to break up, you can de-escalate.
And I feel super proud about it.
Really? Oh, cool. All right. Tell us your glorious story of successful de-escalation.
Well, even just the word de-escalation, like I'm a big fan.
You like that word? Yeah.
I like having words for things.
It's generally a good thing, like with relationships, cops, whatever. We should be de-escalating more things.
Yeah, we just, I think, again, because like abandonment's a big thing, and like I don't want to feel abandoned, and I don't want other people to, and I've had so many experiences where like you date someone and you build this whole little world with them, and then they're just gone.
Yeah, and it's usually very abrupt.
That.
Yeah.
I hate that. You know? Yeah. And so like I would much rather have something de-escalate and have time to like sit with it in my body, like feel what distance with this person feels like, and like I'm okay, like they're still okay. Like there is still a connection. It's just not going to look a certain way. And like also with de-escalation, the ways I've done it is, you know, again, like being clear up front, like what are we looking for? Because then I feel like it's easier to have a check-in to be like, is this still working for us? And there's something you can point to. Right? So I think that's helped. So like someone that I de-escalated with this past year, I've had 2 experiences this past year of de-escalating with folks, and like one went really well and like one went like pretty good, but then like I would say it was still like a little rough, but like that's okay. That's dating. Like one was like I realized that, how do you talk about this? I don't know. Like, okay, yeah, this is so interesting.
And how like language will fail us here in part because we don't see this kind of stuff modeled like we were talking about.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll just like fumble through it.
Just invent a new language now on the spot.
Okay, yeah, because I guess the thing was like...
You could get a chatbot to do it.
Oh my God. Oh God, AI. Some of these details might matter to some folks and then others not, so I'll just like put it out there. But someone I was dating this past year, you know, had like 3 other, like 2 or 3 other partners, and like of differing types. Like one was like someone they'd been with like 15 years, but they don't nest together, and they've actually de-nested, but like they have like a standing date, you know, like every week, and like that's like one of their, like they call them like their anchor person, right? Okay. They're like, it's my anchor partner. Then they had another partner that they were more like romantic and sexual with, and like all of that, and like they were more long distance, but then they moved back, and that was another anchor partner. And then there's like other people that they either like kind of loosely dating or dating, and then like I came into the picture, and like I was like so stoked and so into it, and you know, because they had been doing non-monogamy for a long time, it was just this ease of like talking about how do different partners matter to them in what way. And it was so helpful. And so that was nice, because then after a while, after a couple months, when I realized like, oh, well, I'm not getting what I want out of this, and that's okay. And it wasn't because there's other people or anything. It was just like, honestly, the big reason we de-escalated is because like I'm a huge talker. I want to text all the time. I want touch all the time. And like, you know, they only had so much capacity to give, you know, and they also like really don't like being on their phone, which is super legit. Like it wasn't like I don't want to talk to you. But I actually just finally acknowledged, I was like, oh, like, that's what you can do? That doesn't work for me? And then we had a conversation. I was like, here's a request. And they were like, yeah, I don't think I can meet that request. And I was like, okay, fair. And then, like, I want to kind of focus the time and energy I'm dating with you on other people. Like, I think, like, I would still love to, like, see you, but, like, maybe not as much. And it was so hard to say that. Yeah. You know, and it was like hard for them to hear, because, you know, they like me too, but they also totally got it. They were like, yeah, like what you need, I'm not going to do, you know, like, and I was like, cool. So like now what do we do? And like, we see each other like once a month, And that's what that connection is. And we also talked about labels and language. I was like, I would say like we go on a date once a month, but I wouldn't say we're dating.
Right.
You know, because like if we were dating and really trying to build a relationship, I need a lot more communication. So that's where we're at. It's like we go on a date once a month, and it's sweet, you know, and like we'll check in every couple weeks, little thing here and there, and we follow each other on social media, and it's like sweet and fun. But like I feel really proud that I was like clear with myself, like I named the thing. I was like, what is the thing that's making me not feel as good as I want to in this dynamic? And it was really like time and touch and communication. And I was like, that's pretty core to dating. Yeah. You know? And like, no, they're not bad. They're not wrong. And they were just like, I can't, like, that's just not right. I was like, cool. It was like the calmest interaction. Yeah. We met at the Oak in Beacon Hill, you know, left with a hug and a kiss, you know, like I was like.
Wait, and you still see them like once a month? Yeah, that's amazing.
Still see them once a month, you know.
This is very inspiring.
Yeah.
Like, I love this story.
I also say like we've both been in therapy probably for like like this is like someone, and they've, you know, like this wasn't like a new thing for them either. So like that helped a lot. But it was nice to have that experience and be like, it is possible, and to like know what that feels like in your body, to kind of detach a bit more, but for there still to be some care.
Yeah.
And I would say at some point, if we don't want to even do once a month, I think that'll be fine too. You know.
And I was just thinking about that moment that you described so well of you needed something. This person was like, yeah, I hear that you need that. I don't think I can do it. That right there, I feel like all these cultural lessons I've learned have been, if you care for someone, one of you would override.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of you would put up with getting less or do something that didn't feel right. And if you really cared about each other, you would do that.
Right.
And it's so interesting to just like hold that moment for a second and be like, oh, wait, no.
Right. Well, and I feel like there's a scale of that. Because I also think that, like, there are some people...
We won't be naming names.
There are some people, and I think probably anyone that's been diving into non-monogamy has pushed up against this, where some people approach non-monogamy as, like, I never have to put effort into anything ever. If I'm not just getting everything I want,
interesting.
Or if people have requests of me, well, then I'm just this, like, you know, like, then... next, you know, or like you deal with it, or like those are your feelings that you need to handle. That's a you thing. And I was like, no. Like I think healthy non-monogamy is like there's still a level of there's effort. Right. It doesn't mean you're not putting in effort. And also we just need to be clear of like what is a deal breaker. And I would say that was the big thing. For me, I got clear of like it wasn't just I need you to do this more. It was also like this is a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
But like what's interesting about that is you're saying it was a deal breaker, but it's not like you stopped dating the person. Like we just
found
a compromise. Yeah,
we
and
just
like shifted to what worked better.
Exactly. I was like, if you can't give me more time and attention, then I just want to be focusing on other people where I can get more of that. But also, like, you're still lovely. Like, I like our dates.
You're not like now this person's dead to me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I would never like talk bad of them because they didn't do anything wrong. We just weren't a good fit. Yeah, you know.
That idea of the good tension that you were talking about earlier, and how do you know the difference?
Yeah, and I think that thing about not being able to sit with tension, or like people just expecting non-monogamous relationships to always feel good and be fulfilling and never be hard, is like this combination of like going from monogamy to non-monogamy and kind of being like, I've moved from this thing that was difficult, maybe probably a specific relationship that was difficult, to ones that are going to be easier. Yeah. And then also the thing of just like the sort of like appification of relationships where you're like, I know that there are infinite other people out there. So I'm just going to be like, nope. You know, like if you bring the energy that you bring to like swiping to actual relationships with people, then you're always going to be like, oh, there's more people. Yes. You know, this isn't my person.
Yeah, and I think we all know what it feels like to feel swiped. You know,
what do you mean by that?
We do. Yeah. It's like you bring up one thing, and then people act like you just like are, you know, and you're just like, I would say it's pretty reasonable, you know, like, you know, and then they just. And they're like, thank you, next. And you're like, okay, bye. Like, yeah. Well, and I think that was interesting what you brought up about kind of collecting people and like moving through people and kind of the swiping nature. I would say also there's the healthy side of de-escalation. I would say the unhealthy side of de-escalation, which I also have to be careful with because I hate disappointing people, is also collecting people with these like strings of de-escalate. Like for a while I had like 2 or 3 folks who like I had de-escalated things with, but I hadn't just let go. And like, you know, my friends were like, you could just let go. Like are you just avoiding, right? Like, are you just avoiding actually just breaking up or ending, you know, or are you just really not wanting to hurt someone's feelings? And like, that was another situation with someone else, is I think we both de-escalated and then kept something going that really we should have just broken up. But neither of us, like, we were both really good people and cared about each other and like all that. And like, we just, not that breaking up means you're a bad person, but you know what I mean? Just like, I think we should have just broken up. We didn't. We strung it out for like another 2 months, and then it made it a lot more intense of a breakup. Not like horrible, but just more charged. Where I think if that initial de-escalation conversation had actually just been a breakup, I think it actually would have been like a clean cut, you know, just a clean, you know, and then maybe we could be more friends, you know, or something like that.
This, I think, is hard too, this idea that some relationships do have arcs. And like, there's an end to that arc.
Yeah.
You know, and that's also fine and healthy and not a failure.
Yes.
And that it can be like held as a whole wonderful thing that had a beginning and an end.
Right. But, well, you like to date people who are eminently leaving town. So you like to have a clean end, right?
Yikes. That was
I'm sorry.
One might call it a geographical ending.
You don't like to.
It is also not untrue.
Yeah. I didn't mean it for it to sound cold. Sorry. I'm just saying that happens sometimes, and it is. I'm not saying you like that necessarily, but even though I literally said that.
It is interesting, though, that I think I have less experience with this because a number of people I have dated have been, and I don't, you could say that this is like the natural churn of Seattle right now. You could say that it's something about me.
We just have a radar sensor.
It's also making me realize that when Sarah and I first got together, it was like with a ticking clock. She was like, I'm moving to France to become an au pair. I'll never return again. And I was like, no, I love her so much. The agony. And you know what? That was, in retrospect, great, like early 20s shit.
Yeah.
For the official record, I lasted as an au pair for exactly 2 days. And then I came back.
Yeah.
Shit's rough.
It was
Speaking of clean breaks, and then you told me you were coming back, and I had gone to college and had a girlfriend, and I was just like,
shit.
What? Sarah's coming back? And then I immediately broke.
Yeah.
Mistakes were made.
Sorry, Amanda. Oops.
Well,
I see if I'd been non-monogamous then, I could have just been like, we just probably should think about this a little differently, right?
But you just don't have the, like, non-monogamy. Just when I finally realized like how healthy it could be, I was like, oh shit, like this is amazing. Like it just opens up so much more possibility around like care and affection and people in our life. Like, yeah, like my friend Emma, like she always says like, you know, have a bouquet, you know, like, and like there's different types of people are gonna have different shapes in our life, you know, and I think that's also been something that's been really helpful too.
And that idea that we can choose and be chosen in a lot of different ways too. I think like monogamy has this script that like there's one way to be chosen in a relationship, and that's the only way that really matters. And I don't know.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like at the end of it, right? Like we're all dating because we want to feel loved. You know, we want to feel cared for, and there's just so many different ways to get that. You know, ways to get it emotionally, sexually, physically, like logistically, right? Like lifestyle, like, you know, like I don't know if I'll ever like nest with a partner now that which is hilarious because anyone that's known me for a very long time, like I was like Mr. Monogamous, like I wanted to get married, like I wanted like the whole like, and part of it because I wanted to be chosen.
I like the idea of Mr. Monogamous as a drag person.
Oh my god, Mr. Monogamous! Oh my god,
could be like,
we have to find like a good wedding song or something. I could like maybe like I strip out of a tux on stage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Sirloin can do that.
But I mean, you caught my attention when you said that we all are dating because we want to be loved, because I don't. That feels true in one sense, but I don't think that is the mentality that a lot of people have based on like, you know, a lot of people's like dating app profiles are like, I mean, I see a lot of like straight women on dating apps and many of them say, I'm looking for my person.
But what does that mean?
I want my partner in crime is another. one.
First of all, you're going to need more than one partner in
Yes.
crime. There's
Yeah.
a lot of crime to do in this world.
There is, and it often takes a highly skilled team.
Yeah,
you know? So really, non-monogamy is really the pathway to
more explosive
explosive
specialist.
capitalism and. You know.
You need the hacker,
Yes,
the bomb guy.
You do.
The
Ocean's 11,
debonair,
but
yeah.
make it non-monogamous.
Right.
You know,
need
make the
11
snacks.
people, yeah.
Dude, you also need 11 people to like buy a house and raise a family
Yeah.
in the city. So like, you know,
It's perfect.
like
Yeah.
that was the other thing is like with dating is that's been interesting on the non-monogamy path because like I wanted to be monogamous, I wanted to be married, I wanted this whole thing, and then like realizing I don't, and like it's also brought up a lot about like, well, what does long-term partnership look like for me now? And like, what do I want? And like, do I ever want to get married? And like, what does that mean to me now? And like, what if I have more than like one significant partner? How do you approach partnership? Like, do I want to nest with someone? What does that look like? Like, I mean, now it's exciting. I wouldn't say they're like terrifying questions, but there's definitely like opened up a lot of things where like I spent so much of my life. Like, I didn't really start dating non-monogamously until my early 30s. So like 30 years of like toxic monogamy culture, like just stuck in my head of like, you are only have value if you're chosen by someone. And now I'm like,
Otherwise, you're going to be left.
right.
And I've heard gay people, and I'm using that term intentionally, talk about the validation that comes with like the societal acceptance of like marriage and, you know, coupling and being in a sort of monogamous, like traditional thing is how you like show that you've been accepted by the mainstream.
You are now allowed to do capitalism together.
Yes, totally. It's like, have you seen the shirts at Target? They got rainbow Target, people. We've made it. Oh my God, liberation.
Right, and like wedding cakes with two ladies or two dudes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and then that comes in interesting being trans, right? It's like, for me, like, also, wow, my brain is on caffeine right now. I'm firing in a lot of directions. But like,
okay, no breaks. We're going all the way through.
no, it's totally great. But it's just, y'all are really good interviewers. This is like brain synopses.
It's so fun.
Yeah. I would say a couple things. One is, I was super intense about gay marriage. Like, and I think part of that was growing up in the South and growing up really pretty religious and like, and just in religious culture and all that. Like, yeah, you do. You want to feel seen. I think it's a very human thing to want to be seen, witnessed, and affirmed by a broader sense of the like public and community. And I would say gay marriage does do that. And I think people should be able to do it. I'm probably not going to do it. Which is hilarious. Again, just like people that know me, like I was that person like in college who watched like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but who watched pretty much every single episode of like Say Yes to the Dress and like all those like wedding shows. Like I would binge watch those in college eating top ramen like on the couch, you know, like that was like my like little fantasy land of like one day like I'm gonna have this like big wedding, I'm gonna be picked, and like now I can do it even if I'm gay and like all this stuff. And then now I'm like, I don't want to wear a dress.
So at that point you were like, you're the,
I was more feminine and I wasn't out as trans, and and like, you know, I don't want to wear a dress. I don't think I want to get like legally married. I mean, maybe, but if so, maybe it's more of a like, just because the like hack capitalism type, like you get some discounts, it seems like on some things, you know, like, but like, you know, if anything, it's more like what I want would be like some kind of like, more like just an actual coming together of community to be witnessed by people that actually know you. Not like that I need the state to know me, but I need like actually my chosen family and community to know me. And that's more of just a ritual, a big party, something like that. And also to then allow, like, again, if a relationship has an arc, it's like, okay, well, maybe at one point it does end, but that doesn't mean like I'll never have a ceremony of some kind. Like I do want that, you know, with people, but that's one thing. And the other thing with being trans and like, and we can maybe talk about this more after a break, but like, is that also made it so much more difficult around like who are people that are gonna see me and want to date me, because like I had my own internalized shame and transphobia around especially just being more non-binary, and like I don't want to be a man, like I don't plan to like transition to like a binary sense of a person, and so like it's been hard to like trust that there are people that are gonna want to be with me, attracted to me. They're not gonna like expect me to like bend a certain way or look a certain way. And I think also like honestly, like I've had way better luck dating with non-monogamy folks than monogamous folks, because I think people who are already questioning pretty much every structure of love and romance, I find are a lot more curious and like interested and like accepting of like my own fluidity, you know, and like it's been so affirming. Like I've say like the dating I've done in the past like 3 years of being non-monogamous like has been the way better dating than, you know, however long I was trying to like, you know, when I was more femme, trying to be like, you know, all the pressure to be a woman in the world. So it sucks, you know? And then even when I started to identify more as trans, but like even monogamous, like that was hard, you know? Like, and the person I was dating was also trans. That's also what's hilarious. Like, and like they struggled because they had their own journey with transness. They couldn't really see mine because we had a different experience of being trans, you know? And so like, I've just am so much more excited now than I was then of like, oh, like there are people that, you know, are attracted to me for who I am, you know, and that just feels so much more healthy and exciting, and like there's not that rigidity.
Yeah. And that idea of going from one box to another box, the really strong pressure to be labeled. And,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it's hard too, because even in the queer community, right, there's like pressure of like butch this, femme that, like gay this, gay that, and like I just appreciate queer and trans community so much because I think everyone's just like, fuck it. Like, you know, like even if you're like one way one day and another way another day, like people that truly want to know you and see you are gonna like be on that train with you. And like, you know, my friends and like, you know, the person I'm dating now, like everyone's just like, they're constantly just like really affirming like my own fluidity. And I just can't tell you like as a trans person like how important that is because especially as a non-binary person, because everything about our world is like, you know, yeah, how well do you fit? And like to just constantly exist in like a kind of what I call like a gender fuck space is like, you confuse people all the time and like, I kind of like it, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Do
like,
crime.
Yeah, be gay, do crime, be trans, fuck it up.
Fuck it up.
You know? Yeah. So, it's been, that's been a whole other layer to this journey of like being in my body as a trans person fully for like kind of the first time, really trying on different relationship structures and communications. And not that it's a structure you try on, but like, you know, you lean into, you try and see like which boundaries work for you. It's just been so much more liberating.
Yeah. It's so amazing too that entering into all of these spaces that people, I would say the culture writ large says are dangerous, and that these are the spaces where you're risking being hurt, being abandoned, and being left, are actually the places where you can start feeling healing.
Totally. Well, and especially just with everything that's going on right now in our country around like trans community. I think like a big reason trans folks and trans kids are getting attacked right now is because like it's to be I also think it's interesting because like to be visibly trans, you know, is a constant affront in the public to people's like sensibility of like order and structure. You know, and I think people feel so, it's just sad because I think people just are feeling so threatened by other people existing, and I just think like, wow, like how small of a life must you be living that like just
Isn't that like, this is just making me think about power this whole time, and that people's power resides in a lot in their like gender presentation, right? Yes, and they spend a lot of effort to like be like, I mean, like I'm, you know, doing this thing of like making sure that I present in a way that like, you know, gives me access to, as much as I like want to be cool and progressive, like I'm still like showing up out there taking the white male cis power that there is, right? And like, you know, femme women are doing that, and like we have all these scripts for how to do that, and if you work really hard to do that, and then somebody comes along and they're like fucking it up, like you said, and not doing it, then it is threatening because they're like, oh, I spent all this time trying to be this way so that I could have power, and then this person is showing up and being like, oh, that doesn't mean anything, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Well, and I think it takes like seeing people do it too to like feel the courage. Like there are trans people in my life who I saw who like were non-binary and like weren't trying to like look a certain way, or they were just like playing with gender, and I just remember being like, wait, you can do that? Like you can just like I don't know, like just do whatever you want, like confuse people, and like you're not, you know, and so like that's helped me so much because like I remember when I first started growing a mustache, like I was so terrified to like be out in public. Like it's what felt, you know, because being alone so much in the quarantine, like I was able to just, it was amazing like what just felt natural when you're not constantly fighting to be perceived. Mm-hmm. You know, so like I started growing facial hair and I like was taking testosterone or like all this stuff and like started thinking more about top surgery and like all these things, and like those are things that I think if I had gone through that experience being constantly in the public eye, I think there would have been a lot more stress to maybe present in a more binary way. And because I was able to like root myself in just like what actually feels somatically good in my body, when we like ran to the world, like came out in a mustache and was like, hello, you know, like
there was no awkward half mustache period. You just got to come straight in. Yeah,
just like went in full stash, you know, and like, and you know, and it's definitely awkward because like I still sometimes use the women's bathroom also because Marley, I'm sorry, the men's bathroom is gross. Like, you know, like my joke is like, I hope I never pass so much that I can't use the women's bathroom because I really don't want to use the men's bathroom, you know, like, or, you know, ideally every place just has single stalls, like PSA to any business owner, please
for the
just
love
have
of
a
God,
single stall bathroom or make them, whatever.
Stop doing this to us.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, it's just like, but now I feel so much more like confident and comfortable, and a lot of that is because I have people in my life that are very affirming, you know, and I don't feel pressure to like look a certain way or present a certain way, and and then too, just with dating, like people, it's just so much easier to date folks that are already kind of like saying fuck it to things that are being told to us are like, this is the way to be, you know, so.
Yeah.
As I was listening to you talk, I was thinking also about how history will likely look back on the time of the pandemic as this like huge awakening in many ways. Like the fact that many people came out as queer, as trans, as non-monogamous, as like neurodivergent, as, you know, having mental health challenges. It was definitely a period where, and I think it's a period we're still living in, where there was some kind of opportunity there, and I think it's hard to talk about it that way because I don't want to not take into account all of the really traumatic and awful things that happened. But there is something there. Something there feels meaningful.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think that's like, I mean, that's my biggest wish for everyone. It's just like find the thing that makes you feel free and just keep doing that.
Yeah.
You know? And I think for everyone it's going to look different, you know, it's going to look different, and that's okay. It makes the world a lot more interesting if we're all doing different things. You know, if we're all doing the same thing. You know, that's how we get Target gays.
I was going to say, that's just like a lot of wedding
Target
cakes.
gay out there, I'm sorry, I love you. I'll see you at the Pride Parade, but actually probably not, but that's okay.
I hear Target is throwing their own Pride Parade this year.
I'm sure they
What
are.
if the thing that makes me feel free is peeing on the floor of the men's restroom? Though?
Oh, really? Okay, well, you do that. And as long as I have another option, then we're
great.
good.
Okay,
you know?
cool.
We'll just have a single stall for people who want to pee on the floor.
Yeah, cool.
And you can go in that way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Absolutely.
Yes, every park bathroom in Seattle is that bathroom.
Speaking of pee, this would be a great moment to take a break.
That's why I brought it
A pee
up.
break. Thank you. Okay. I'll be right back. Eli, I want to make sure that we get to spend some time talking about sirloin.
Yes.
Tell us about sirloin.
Oh, great. Well, so yeah, sirloin is my drag persona. I've been doing drag now for about a year. It's something I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And again, like through the pandemic, it's just like, you just got to do it. And I would say for me, doing sirloin has been really liberating because sirloin's whole persona is kind of like rhinestone, cowboy, you know, a lot of meat jokes.
It's like great.
Sirloin's Instagram is so good.
Oh, thank you.
Last photo on there is just, I love it. Print it out, frame it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. And I would say for me, like so much of it is kind of reclaiming masculinity, honestly, being country and being Texan and being Southern. I think Texas caused a lot of trauma for me growing up. Men caused a lot of trauma for me growing up. And I think just like masculinity and the patriarchy, I've also had to do my own journey, right? Like what's the difference between masculinity and patriarchy and, you know, all that. But I think for sirloin to like make toxic masculinity the butt of the joke has been just the best thing ever. You know, I literally have a whole note on my phone that's just like all these male stereotypes that I'm like waiting to find the right song to like do a whole thing to, you know, like I got like frat boy, I've got, you know, like I did like a politician in the last show. And
are you going to do one where you're wearing the salmon colored shorts that have been like in so many memes recently?
Yes, I need to.
Wow.
I need to. Oh yeah, I mean I want to do like boat dad, you know,
Yeah,
like you know,
Yes.
like, you know, we all know those dudes out on Lake Washington in their little power boats and think they're so cool at 45 and, you know, like, just like, you know, I have things to say. And so, yeah, so it's been really great to just lean into that. And I think also like lean into performing again. I grew up doing performance in theater and then thought that I had to like leave that in order to do politics and policy. And so for me, I'm kind of living my best life right now where it's like I get to do politics and policy in my day job, and then I have this awesome, you know, side hobby where I'm getting to be, you know, a freak and a faggot, and, you know, it just feels so good to get to like embody that and not really have any kind of like boundaries around how I'm perceived, what I say, you know. So yeah, like most people in my work life actually have no idea that I do this.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to have some of them like find me online and they're like, and I'm like, oh, so-and-so's following me now. They work in so-and-so's office. You know?
Yeah, but that's, I mean, I know that doing that kind of whatever trailblazing, I don't know if that's a stupid or problematic term, but like is so valuable and powerful, like then you know that they know, and like it's the same thing with being non-monogamous, or like maybe different, but similar, that you're sort of, you know, you have this like discomfort and you're maybe causing discomfort, but ultimately the result of that discomfort is probably like liberation for people, right?
Totally. And like the couple work folks that have come out to shows, it's been awesome because then it feels like, you know, I feel a little bit more relaxed at work or in other spaces. And I think, again, most people want to laugh, have a good time, and like poke fun at the things that like that kind of form of satire is like as old, I think, as like human consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've always like you look back at like Greek plays and like all like satire, gender, playing with gender, like this is not new. You know?
And poking fun at power, which in many ways, like that
Yes.
distinction that you're making between masculinity and patriarchy and like some of those tropes, that is the very heart of satire.
Exactly. And I just love it. It's just like, oh my gosh, I just, like, I don't want to do the type of drag. I mean, I think all forms of drag are amazing. And what I love is doing a lot more theatrical. There's a whole like arc to the story. I have props. There's kind of this like constant kind of tongue in cheek and like using the lyrics of a song to really like play with it. You know, like one of my favorite things that I did lately was, you know, did Shania Twain's You're Still the One, and To a Gas Lawnmower as a Suburban Dad. Had my Seahawks hat on, Seahawks shirt, got the white tube socks up to my knees, New Balance, you know, the guy that like, you know, the male Karen, you know, and like made him the butt of a joke, kind of like making love to a gas lawnmower. Also, P.S. it was so hard to find a gas lawnmower in Seattle. Everyone's all green and shit.
The people
and
who
like,
still have them are not giving them up either.
Yes. And it finally worked out that some friends of mine had one, and so it was funny to like, and I had to like put a
Were
whole
you like
PSA.
doing the cord and stuff?
Yeah, I did a little cord. I had my own little gas can, you know, like, and it was just like so fun. Like, this is a person that like, you know, this is a stereotype that, you know, gets a lot of airtime, but actually just got to like make them the butt of the joke. It was awesome.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say there's something I find really, I want to use the word soothing, and I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but the idea that you could take some of those stereotypes of masculinity and patriarchy and make them something that feels fun and benign and like kind of wonderful.
Yes.
I just like, as you were talking about it, I was just like, oh, like deep sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Feeling it, you know?
Yeah. Totally. Well, and also I think kind of showing masculinity in a variety of ways, because I'm not just playing like a binary male character. Like, I think what I like about Sirloin is also like, he's a little, you know, he's queer. He's a queer, you know, like, he likes women, he likes men, he likes, you know, a little bit of everybody. And like, I'm also enjoying playing with that too, of like also getting to show masculinity gets to be varied and, you know, like, and I think that's really important in the world.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I don't know how exactly to frame this question, but I feel like there's like, isn't there a sort of like a philosophical thing behind drag that is, well, I guess I'm curious, like what what is it? And like, if you're a masculine drag performer, you're talking about sort of like taking away questioning the power or like interrogating the power. Is that the same thing that's happening with feminine drag? And like, what is the...
I would say so. I think at one point too, I think with drag and gender is I think the biggest thing is just like, it's all a spectrum, right? Because again, we got to like constantly move ourselves away from trying to like, well, is this drag and is this not drag?
Right.
Is that correct drag? Like there are people that are very gatekeepy, even within the queer community and the drag community of like, complaints around quote like bio queens, right? Like cis women who do drag.
Right.
I'm like, fuck yeah, like do it. Like play up feminine, like it's about performance, right? And for some people there's, trans women who do drag. And drag, it was a huge part of their journey. I mean, the person who just won RuPaul's Drag Race, Sasha, like she's a trans woman. Like there's so much about gender and performance and play. And I think honestly, like if all of us had the experience growing up where we could play with gender and expression, I think we'd all look pretty different.
Yeah.
Probably. I think there'd be a lot more senses of liberation in our bodies. And I think the reason some people like struggle with drag is again, like people are scared of seeing someone being liberated because then it's a mirror to ourselves of how constricted we are in ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's why I was asking that, because when you talk about the stereotypes like boat dad or whatever, it's like as a like masculine cis man, I sort of love those presentations. Like obviously there are things that are problematic about them or whatever, but like it's kind of amazing to have your gender presentation be something that can be kind of like caricatured.
Totally.
And so that that it's not like what makes you who you are 100%, and it's like, or like that if I don't show up in that exact way, that doesn't mean that I'm not a man. Totally. Right? Or like there's no particular way to be. There's kind of all these different ways to be, and like, I feel like a great affinity for some of those things in a tongue-in-cheek way. Totally. Because it's like, that's kind of what's there. Totally. Right?
Well, I think it's why a lot of people love like femme drag too and drag queens, right? Mm-hmm. Is because there are some people that don't like it because they think it's poking fun at women. Right. And since women are oppressed, that then like sing it. I'm like, I don't think that's what it's doing. Like it's poking fun at, I think, and also not all drag is poking fun. Right? We got glamour queens, we got people where it's just actually like they're just trying to like wow you and they do a fucking good job. Yeah. If you've never seen someone have to like tuck themselves in the stuffed pantyhose and put on breastplate and put on makeup for 3 hours, if people think that like they're just doing that because they want to like have power over something, like that's ridiculous. Like people are doing it because like it's a form of play, it's a form of getting to like experience something in their own body and like be a performer and like
often homage to things that are deeply important to people.
Like exactly, like impersonators, like when people do like celebrity impersonation drag, things like that, like it's an homage to stuff. So like that's like drag is such a like spectrum of an art, and like there can always be like some people that do it in poor taste or whatever, like the joke like didn't land or wasn't quite the right thing, but like also like I just also, since most folks that do drag are queer, I also think too, when we think about power structures, looking at how oppressed queer people are, how oppressed like gender is and trans people are, like, I mean, even if there was something that like poked too hard or was or whatever, like we don't really have that kind of power. like that's not it's, like,
especially with what you do, it's punching up for sure, right?
Exactly. We're punching. We're punching up. So I just think it's really fun. And I think Seattle's a great drag community because there's a lot of different types of drag. Yeah. And it's just so awesome. Like you don't just have to be like, I've actually struggled at first with a bit like being called drag king because and I feel like we're comfortable with it now, and like sometimes I just say drag performer, like so like but I say drag king too, like, but again it's just there can be so much weight put on things, and
I, not to go on a whole tangent here, and one of our children is really interested in drag right now.
Oh my god, we should do a little workshop. Oh my god, that'd be so fun.
One of the things that he is struggling with is, first of all, it's really hard to access drag for kids. Yeah. And I am a little bit like...
See national conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Children interacting with people in drag.
And also he's like, I want to do it. I don't just want to see it. And it's interesting to see the reactions for him in the world. Like, he dressed up in like a little preppy outfit for a memorial that we went to here recently, and then he just wore this like fabulous pearl necklace.
Yes. Style.
He looked amazing.
Yeah.
And also the amount of commentary. It was just incredible.
Right.
Like how
Yeah.
that one little act just gets so much commentary from
Right.
Yeah, well, and this was making me think about how we went to the Trans Day of Visibility a couple weeks ago, and there were drag queens, and he was like watching that, and then there was a drag king,
Yeah.
and like that, he like really was interested in that,
Yeah.
and was just like excited about realizing that that was a thing too,
Totally.
and just being like, you know, he's like AMAB,
Yeah.
and like just having both possible
Yes.
sort of any possible
Totally.
expression affirmed
this
was
giggle
like
that he got. That, I mean, when you talk about liberation and the possibility of what things could look like
Yeah.
for younger people and other generations, it was like this giggle that was just like, oh my god, like, you know, and it was so exciting and so
yeah,
beautiful.
so sweet.
Oh my gosh. Well, so glad you brought that up, because there is an all ages drag show that happens now once a month in West Seattle at Kenyon Hall. So my drag mom puts it on, Jezebel Johnson. It's called the Kenyon Hall Cabaret. Next one's on May 12th.
Okay.
So just follow on the Kenyon Hall website. But it's all ages, starts at 7:30. And yeah, I mean, 6-year-olds giving out dollars, honestly, like, they're lit. Like, they're the best tippers.
Yeah.
Please give your kid
Yeah.
the cash.
Yeah.
They're
Right,
gonna
6-year-olds
tip
are
a
also
lot
obsessed
more.
with money,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, and they want to be
Yeah.
part of it, right?
Yeah.
So they're like in the middle of the aisle, and you're like having to like dance around them, but you're like into it. 'Cause you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay.
Oh, our kid is gonna lose his mind.
Yeah.
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 Okay, while we're doing plugs, do you have any performance? I think we're going to release this episode very soon, so do you have any performances coming up if people want to see Sirloin?
Yeah, I'll be at the Kenyon Hall Cabaret. It's put on, by Jezebel Johnson. And then I'll also be at Box Bar on the 13th, which
Of
is
May.
hilarious because it's a vegan restaurant in West Seattle. Sirloin will.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's gonna be great.
So, but you can follow me at Sirloin Seattle, at Sirloin Seattle, and then I'll keep things posted there.
Great. I love
Yeah.
it. Last couple of things, and maybe
Yeah.
you can take it wherever you want to, Eli. I was curious about something you mentioned about reclaiming being from the South and being from Texas, and I just was curious to hear you talk about that a little bit. I think as folks who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, we can often get places like Texas totally wrong.
Yeah.
And also, we're always very interested in them. So I'm curious to hear you talk about that a little bit more. And then the last question I had was, I'm putting together kind of like an informal polyamory primer for people who are opening up and just getting like piece of advice from people, or like, you know, some of those
Yeah.
hard lessons learned. So
Yeah, I love that. Okay, yeah, well, reclaiming the South. Well, I think first off is, and a lot of people have said this, so this is not anything original, but I think the biggest thing about reclaiming the South is just understanding that like resistance and organizing has been there since time immemorial, right? And I think a lot of people often view the South as like a lost cause, or like, oh, it'll never turn blue, blah, blah, blah. And I think one is like people have been, existing, resistant. I mean, mutual aid, like, I'm sorry, that's a Southern thing, you know? I think, you know, like, that's not some like anarchist Seattle, like,
wait.
you know, like, you know? Yeah, like, I mean,
We're probably the worst.
you know, like, I think like growing up in the South, as hard as it was as a queer person, it was also where I like saw what like resistance and joy can look like amidst like so much hard shit. And like what true community care can look like. And also what the long game is. I mean, people are playing the long game in the South, right? Against racism, against voter suppression, against transphobia, against, you know, like queer people have always been in the South. Like it's really devastating, all the things that are passing through the legislature. And also like, you know, I'm seeing communities and visibility that like I never saw when I was young, you know? And so I think so much through like the more visible we are, the more attacked you are. Right. And like, I don't feel a sense of hopelessness, excuse me. Don't feel a sense of hopelessness. When I think about organizing in the South, and like definitely encourage folks to like support organizations that are based in the South and organize in the South. Because I think like also so much of what we see there is like voting structures, and gerrymandering and other things. So like, it's not just like, oh, people should turn out to vote. Like, people are. I mean, you want to talk about like, you know, black voters in the South have been fucking turning out for, like, you know, like,
and fighting to turn out.
Yeah, and fighting to turn out. And like, you know, so for people, I think up north to like look down and be like, oh, well, they just didn't turn people didn't turn out, or like young people didn't turn out, or like whatever. I'm like, wow, like F you. Like people, you know, there are structures at play that are making it almost impossible. And I don't think it's hopeless, but like, I do think it's going to be like the long haul. But I think any time we look at like the heart of any social movement, I think like you can look at organizing in the South, and what sucks is the stories just aren't told. Right. You know?
They're there.
They're totally there. They're totally there. And I think it just taught me so much around multiracial organizing, intergenerational organizing, community care. Like, I'm so grateful for it, because you have to rely on each other. You can't cast people aside, you know, and you have to grow together. So I think like reclaiming the South is so key around, sometimes the things that are really hard, you know, obviously shape us. And like, I'm really grateful. Like, it was hard to grow up there, and also I'm really grateful that I did. And, you know, I'm really glad to be here, and also like continue to shape things here, because we all know like the Northwest has a long way to go with structural oppression as well. Yeah. You know, most regressive tax codes, still super racist. Like, we've got all of our own stuff here too. So I definitely don't view it as like I'm here now, so I don't need to like do anything.
No gas lawnmowers though. We have no gas lawnmowers.
So. Solved it.
Yeah. Motherfucker got a Prius.
Speaking
Can I cuss on this?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
We have an E for explicit next to every single episode.
Okay, great.
So here's the most controversial question, though, of course, which is best barbecue in Seattle. Is there any good barbecue in Seattle, Eli?
Yes, there are, and it's all pop-ups. So a couple ones. One is Burn Unit Barbecue, super good. Shout out to them. Yeah. Oh, you should ask them about. There's a whole story to it. It's great. And also Northwest Texas Barbecue. His stuff's awesome. He pops up at a lot of breweries around. And then up in Marysville is Jeff's Texas Style Barbecue, and he does a lot of good stuff. And there's even more, but those are some of my top three. I mean, I could go on.
It sounds like we gave you that question because you were so ready. Here's
my top three. I feel like a lot of people from the South, when I ask that, they're like, "You just got to come to my house." Right. Which is no, I don't. I get invited to people's houses.
No, okay. Here's the thing, though. Grilling is not the same as barbecuing. Barbecuing takes a lot of time and a special kind of wood. Right. And I have ADHD, and I don't have time for that shit. So I will go eat someone else's 13 hours of labor and love, and I will pay them a lot of good money for it, because thank you for your service.
Yeah. Yes, truly.
Right.
Because I just rolled out of bed and I just want a beer and eat some brisket, you know?
Oh my God, I'm getting really hungry. Brisket sounds so good. Okay, thanks, Eli. Those are all three places I had not heard of before.
Great.
No, you're bringing the outsider barbecue knowledge.
And what about any pieces of advice for newbies to non-monogamy? It's on trend, as you know. Lots and lots of people in this city, and I think everywhere, are exploring it.
Yeah.
They all should go on barbecue dates. Yeah, to these places.
Unless you're unless you're dating a vegetarian, like I am. It's great. I love it. And I would say. Some primer. I would say, well, one is I think I would say just lean into communication early and often, because I think, and be vulnerable, with what you want, what your desires are, any hard no's, any hard boundaries. Because if people can't meet them for whatever reason, the earlier you know that, I think the better, then that kind of helps prevent any resentment kind of growing. I think, don't be afraid to let things go or let people go. Mm-hmm. I think, really viewing it from abundance, not to the abundance to the point of, swipe, right? But, abundance to the point of, there's a lot of ways to be loved, and there's a lot of people that want to love you. Mm-hmm. And I think also, it's okay to have your own desires and needs change. I feel like that's, a big thing. My whole, when people were what kind of non-monogamy do you do? Or what's your approach? What I say now is really different than what I said, 3 years ago. And it'll probably continue to shift, especially too as I like deepen relationships with folks, right? Like, when you're not really tied to any one person, like what you're looking for might be different versus when you're really tied to someone and like, really building something really intentionally and like everything's, so it shifts and changes and that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. Change.
Yeah.
That is something that comes up again and again, I think, is that non-monogamy creates space to let change be okay and not scary. And
Yes.
in fact, exciting.
It does. Yeah, it does. Well, and I think also you brought up something earlier about like when to bring things up or like how, and I feel like, it's like the hardest part about non-monogamy, right? Because it can be real. I mean, well, in dating in general, even if you're monogamous, like it's scary to like show what we really need or something that's hard or is this a big deal or is this a little deal? And like, like something I really appreciated with the girl I'm dating now, Natalie, like, early on, like there was something that was kind of, bothering her and she wanted to talk about and she did. She texted first and was like, hey, like, do you want to talk about this in person? Do you want to talk about it over text? It's not a huge thing, but it is something that's just like been like kind of prickly for me. And, I was like, cool, like I got to consent and to like text her phone and when and, like I was like, since it wasn't a big deal, I was like, yeah, let's just chat with her over text. And we like cleared it up in like 5 minutes. And I was like, and it just set this on-ramp for us. Where it was like, oh, like, this is someone that I could just do this with, and it's been great. And, like, I think, like, it's really, like, healing for me to, like, be able to just lean into that communication and talk through prickly things because, like, that's normal. Like, we're in this fucking universe and we're all just, like, these floating blobs of people on this one planet in this one moment. And
This
like,
is Eli's dating profile.
let's blob together. It's sexy. But it's like, it's honestly, it blows my mind that any of us can like make something work because like, of course there's going to be some tension and like, and good tension and other things because like, we're our own little universes in this big universe and we just bump into each other and there's some attraction and some chemistry and then you try to make something work. Like, it's kind of a miracle.
It is.
And so like when it's good, it's good. And and then when it's not good, like we have to learn to just move on because like there's so much to like experience and feel and like if we get too myopic and like too like scared and small and like be in a small shape, then like what are we on this fucking planet for?
Yeah.
Like I didn't like fucking struggle through like so much homophobia my whole life to like move to Seattle to like play small.
Yeah.
So you're saying be a
Like,
big blob.
Yeah, I'm
whatever
ready to
shape
be a
you
big
want.
blob. I want to be my big trans sirloin drag like anxious attachment, big love language. I'm ready to like show all my little parts to folks. Like I'm a lot, and like that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm going with this now.
Well, that's
I loved it.
a great outro. Thank you for sharing your
Eli.
parts with us.
Yeah, we're not here to play small.
We're not here
show
to
all
play
your
that.
parts. Show all your stuff. Like,
And that, what else are we doing?
Yeah.
Message in it too. Like, what are you
all
saving
this
that
time
bigness for?
yeah.
What are you saving it for?
What are you saving it for?
Yeah,
Right?
he can't take it with you.
Yeah, you can't take it with you. Like,
When you go to the
exactly.
big blob,
Yeah.
collective blob in the sky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't take it with you. And like I think that's and I think too, kind of closing out also like on the pandemic part and like quarantine, like I think we all like felt that loss of like being seen and being in community, and so I think there's so much to lean into now, and it's scary, but it's
Yeah.
worth it.
Right. And it showed us some of the things that weren't working and gave us some space to imagine things that could work
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Eli.
Aw,
This
Thanks
has
for
been
being
wonderful.
here.
It's such a good
Great.
conversation.
So good.
And thank you for listening to Mistakes Were Made. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on Instagram at MistakesCast, and also follow Sirloin on Instagram at Sirloin Seattle. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
That was so fun.